That's a great question. And they're obviously, I think, intimately connected. What I'm interested in with the notion of entanglement is the ways in which our activity, our living, our daily life, our work always contains within itself resources for interrogating the practice or the activities or being concerned with them. So the thought is that in a way, our first order lives already are organized by second order concerns. And dialectic is one instance of that phenomenon. But I'm talking about something that comes out in much more practical ways. You know, when two people are talking, they're not just bang, 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 word, response, word, response, word, response. The very way in which they conduct their conversation is sensitive to how hard it is to have a conversation. That is, they're aware that there's a problem about finding the right word, or that the other person may not understand, so that they need in the conversation itself to be creative, inventive, self-reflective. This is an example for me of entanglement. Reflection on language is built into the engagement with language, which is one reason also why we can't think of language as merely habitual. Our habits are interpenetrated with the problem of having habits. The question really puts your finger on something at the heart of what I'm concerned with. I think that art, to put it bluntly, art and philosophy are two different modes of the same thing, or they're two different realizations of the same thing. I sometimes say they're two different species of the common genus. And what is that common genus? It's the genus of reorganizing ourselves. Both art and philosophy aim at releasing us from or freeing us from the ways in which we just happen to find ourselves being, whether as a cultural matter or a technological matter or a psychological matter or a political matter. The way this works in the arts, I believe, is that works of art are always puzzling. They're always confusing. They're always strange. Now, some traditional art is not strange because we know it because we're part of the tradition, but even the traditional art always holds meanings and holds levels of significance that go beyond what you can easily answer. So every work of art is an opportunity to truly come into relationship with it, to truly know it. But that requires that you question yourself, that you interrogate yourself, in my language, that you reorganize yourself, because you can't rely on pre-existing labels or categories of what it is you're doing. You need to really be in the moment and come to terms with what there is there. Now, one of the reasons why art is so important is that that work of finding the resources to come into relationship with where you are or with what you're encountering is actually something we need to do throughout our lives in many, many different domains, in our actual personal relationships, in our political lives, in our social lives. So art becomes a context in which we can bring into the open this fact about ourselves, which is that we're always struggling to work to be in relationship with the world. Art does that. I'm repeating myself, but I'm trying to close the loop. Art does that by creating opportunities that are strange, that makes us then have to do that work. Now, I think philosophy, everything I've just said about art could be said about philosophy. It's an odd thing because we think of philosophy as about the intellect and art is more about affect and feeling and the senses. But what do philosophers do? Philosophers don't prove theorems. They don't establish theses. If they did, then we'd all agree with each other. There'd be one philosophy, just like there's one physics. No, philosophers change the way we see the landscape of our ideas and beliefs and commitments and values. And they do that by creating puzzles, by creating paradoxes, or by giving us opportunities to be confronted by what we think and what we think we know, so that we need to think in new ways and discover new ways of knowing. So art and philosophy both, I think, are in the business of changing us, and in changing us also liberating us. This is a very deep question. The answer is yes and no. I say that because one of the things that art works with, and this is also true of philosophy, but I'll just focus on the case of art, is art work what we think we know when we work in the space of uncertainty. So of an artwork, we can never say that we have a procedure for deciding whether the artwork is a success or a failure, because art itself puts into question what success or failure might mean. Now, we can come to believe that an artwork fails or succeeds, or that we can criticize it in one way or another. But we always have to, in doing that, take responsibility for every aspect of what we say. You know, with the glasses, either they're good glasses or they're bad glasses. Either they work or they're too expensive or they're cheap. Either they're reliable or they're not. And we have a very clear criterion in advance about what excellence means for a pair of glasses. That's not true with art. That's not true with music. That's not true with dance. So when I say that art reorganizes us, one of the things I mean is that it suspends the certainties that govern normal life. And those might be habits, those might be modes of feeling, those might be ideas or assumptions, those might be political assumptions about, if you think about assumptions we make about what it is to be a man or a woman or a citizen or a good person, art can put all of those ideas into play. And there's no limit to what subject matter art can play with, including political. So now why do I say about whether art is political reorganization, yes and no? If I'm in the business of propaganda, if I'm trying to advance a political cause, whatever the cause, maybe a cause that is obviously good, but if I'm in the business of advancing a political cause, I'm doing propaganda. And now we have a very clear standard of success and failure. Whether I influence action, or whether I mobilize the people, or whether I bring about a certain kind of change. And that puts me in the same camp as an advertiser or any other kind of manipulator. And art is in the reorganization business, not in the organization business. Politicians and political leaders are in the business of organizing us. And that's sometimes a good thing. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but it's not what artists are doing. If art is aiming at changing perception or changing the way we think or changing our values, then it starts to seem more like propaganda. It starts to seem more overtly didactic or manipulative. And I want us to preserve a conception of art that is different from that. So here it's useful for me to make a point that I haven't had a chance yet to make explicit. We have art, as we've been describing, and we also have the notion of the aesthetic. And I think that the notion of the aesthetic is not the same as the notion of art. The notion of the aesthetic is much wider than the notion of art. And often in traditional philosophy, when we think about the aesthetic, we wonder about beauty or genius or originality or different kinds of artistic value or aesthetic value. But the real challenge of the aesthetic is the challenge that we face whenever we encounter something which, although it's there for us, not hidden, well lit, open to view, is nevertheless somehow resistant to being known or seen, or resistant to letting us get into relationship with it. If I meet a person from a different culture, or a person of different values, or if I encounter a language that I don't know, I can't even perceive it. I can't even understand it or recognize it. I can't even, with a language that I don't know, I may not even be able to discern the words from mere noises. So we very often find ourselves in a situation where we need to move from not seeing to seeing what is there, or move from seeing to seeing differently what is there. And this movement, this kind of transformation from not seeing to seeing, or from seeing to seeing differently, that is, I think, the very essence of the aesthetic. And these questions about bringing the world into focus are the concerns of the aesthetic. Now, from this, two points follow. One is that the aesthetic is not confined to art, but in fact is a general aspect of our consciousness. We're constantly needing to do the work to know another person, or to see a situation clearly, or to cope with differences that defy our habitual expectations. So the aesthetic is a problem for life, or to put it in the language of entanglement, ordinary perceptual and epistemic consciousness and aesthetic consciousness are entangled. Now, art, what is its relationship to the aesthetic? I think art explores the aesthetic, investigates the aesthetic, curates opportunities for us to encounter the aesthetic, or what in the book I call the aesthetic predicament. Art does that with any subject matter. The art may concern God. The art may concern freedom. The art may concern love. The art may concern parenthood. The art may concern politics. The art can happen anywhere, but what art's basic method is confronting us with something which we need to change ourselves so that we can come into relationship with it. This is my answer to your question. First of all, I'm deeply, deeply grateful that the book is being translated and that I have this chance to share this picture of ourselves with the Turkish world. I hope this can be the beginning of a conversation between me and Turkish readers and Turkish creators. I would hope that there'll be an opportunity for me to visit and discuss these ideas with you. It's the image that I'm offering, or what I'm trying to share, is a vision of philosophy and art as true sources of value that are distinct from and not reducible to natural scientific knowledge. We live in a world where there's so much emphasis, and for good reasons, placed on the importance of positive knowledge, where by positive knowledge, I mean knowledge where we know in advance already what counts as evidence for or against it. But the thing that philosophy and art offer is the opportunities for forms of transformation, or even, I don't use this word in the book, but even conversion, where the world we know can be transformed, or can be known again in a new way. Philosophy aims at that. Philosophers aren't trying to convince you of something or prove something to you. The kind of philosopher that I am offering, the kind of philosophy that I'm offering, wants to give you resources for becoming. And this is something I very much wish to share with my Turkish audience.